What the fuck is this piece of shit?
It is unacceptable to compare Navalny with Trump. Navalny sacrificed his life for democracy. Donald Trump tried to sacrifice Mike Pence's life to kill democracy.
President Trump continuing to compare his legal woes to the persecution of Alexei Navalny.
It's beyond grotesque.
While still...
A guy who has been accused by a judge of rape, a guy who has been accused or been found liable for sexual assault by a jury.
Massive fraud.
Massive fraud. Hundreds of millions of dollars.
91 criminal counts.
Creditors. Yeah. And the thing I just got to say really quickly, the thing is, nobody is questioning whether Donald Trump stole papers from the White House, whether he stole nuclear secrets, whether he
had sex with a porn star and paid her off. No one's questioning it. He
illegally right before an election. Nobody's even questioning that. And that guy is comparing himself to Alexei Navalny.
Grotesque.
It's grotesque.
And he continues to refuse to criticize Vladimir Putin on top of all of that.
Not a surprise at all.
I'm going to play for you his latest comments just as the Biden White House prepares new major sanctions against the Kremlin following Navalny's death.
Tonight on The Readout.
I'm sorry I'm so upset, but please help President Trump. If you can afford $5 or $10, if you can't afford $1, fine. Just pray. Pray for this country. Pray for this president. And if you got any money to give, give it.
Empty your piggy bank. Sell your jewelry. Trump and company are begging for your last few dollars to pay his bills and judgments. It's the biggest grift in American political history. Start a cult and watch the money roll in. Also tonight, two critical Trump-related rulings from the Supreme Court could be imminent, involving his claim of absolute immunity and on whether states can kick him off the ballot under the 14th Amendment. But we begin tonight with a dictator's fears. The body of Alexei Navalny is still being held hostage by the Russian penal system, because even in death, Vladimir Putin is afraid of him. Members of Navalny's team have said that Russian authorities claim the cause of Navalny's death is still unknown, and they have refused to release his body for the next 2 weeks as a preliminary inquest continues. Navalny's mother has been standing outside the penal colony pleading directly to Putin for the return of her son's remains. Shortly after her appeal, police announced a new criminal case against Alexei Navalny's younger brother, Oleg. On Monday, Navalny's widow, Yulia, created a Twitter account and accused Putin of a cover-up. Elon Musk's ex suspended the account briefly for spam or abuse. And you should know that holding a body hostage isn't new for Vladimir Putin. Shortly after FSB agents poisoned Navalny with a nerve agent back in 2020, doctors refused to release him to a German hospital until the poison had time to work its way out of his system. Navalny survived that murder attempt, but unfortunately, Putin persisted, and he got his way this time. And Alexei Navalny wasn't the only man Putin likely had murdered last week. The body of a Russian military pilot who defected from Russia by flying a military helicopter into Ukraine was found riddled with bullets and run over by a car in Spain. He is dead, likely because he dared to vocally oppose Russia's war in Ukraine. These murders are yet another reminder of the unadulterated brutality of the Putin regime, which Navalny was far too familiar with. And while he had made it his life's work to stand up to Putin's violence and evil, Navalny, in the final weeks of his life, had warned of another threat, another evil: Donald Trump. According to the New York Times, Navalny wrote to a friend recently that Trump's agenda for a second term as the American president looked, quote, really scary. After Navalny's death, Trump dared to compare himself to the martyred opposition leader, claiming that stealing classified material, trying to nullify the votes of 81 million Americans, and vowing to shoot people who object to his policies was tantamount to Navalny's quest to bring freedom of speech and democracy to Russia. Mind you, Trump has never put himself in grave danger. He is a physical coward who, when called upon by his country to serve during the Vietnam War, declined because his feet hurt. And while America's former coward-in-chief putts away on a golf course between court hearings while comparing himself to Navalny, the reality is much more apparent. Trump is America's Putin, so much so that he had his lawyer argue that as president, he could order SEAL Team 6, one of America's most elite military institutions, to murder his political opponents, which is literally what Putin seems to have just done to Alexei Navalny. The similarities don't end there. Putin and Trump both want to twist their countries into the same awful thing, a Christian nationalist state. According to Politico, yet another think tank close to Trump is working on plans to make that happen if he returns to the White House. Politico obtained documents showing that according to the Center for Renewing America, led by a right-wing extremist named Russell Vought, Trump's former OMB director, Christian nationalism is a top priority, along with invoking the Insurrection Act on day one to quash protests and refusing to spend authorized congressional funds on unwanted projects. Thanks to reporting from Politico, the New York Times, and Axios, we now know that CRA and Project 25 have a long list of plans for America on day one of a second Trump administration, including mass deportations, shooting migrants at the border, full immunity for police to kill at will, gutting the EPA, terminating the Constitution, bombing Mexico, exiting NATO, banning Muslims from entering the country, imposing ideological screenings for immigrants, revoking student visas of those who protest on college campuses against Israel. He also wants to dismantle the Department of Education, enforce Florida-style patriotic education in our schools, end federal funding of any schools that mention so-called critical race theory, gender ideology, or what people like Stephen Miller determine to be inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content. They intend to force children to learn about their version of the nuclear family, including the roles of mothers and fathers and things that make men and women different and unique. That's what our kids will learn in Trump's Christian nationalist public schools, while corporations and America's wealthiest men, like Jamie Dimon, Elon Musk, and every other rich celebrity supporting Trump, get yet another giant tax cut. Or maybe they just cease to pay any taxes at all. And I didn't even get to the national abortion ban Trump is planning and the further plans of the right-wing majority on the Supreme Court. The conservative majority on the court, led by Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas, have already waged a full frontal assault on modern society, including repealing the civil rights era, abortion access, and affirmative action. And they are currently gunning for contraceptive access and maybe even gay marriage. And that is because justices like Alito and Thomas share the religious far right's grievances about society's evolution. Alito once complained that in certain quarters, religious liberty is fast becoming a disfavored right, while the ultimate second-tier constitutional right in the minds of some is the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. Why would he care about actual second-class citizens like women, the poor, black and brown people, or gays, lesbians, and trans people? Alito and Trump are joined by House Speaker Mike Johnson, who, according to one MSNBC columnist, is the most unabashedly Christian nationalist speaker in U.S. history, which means he, too, wants to basically eviscerate the separation between church and state. He once called homosexuality an inherently unnatural and dangerous lifestyle. Now, if all of this sounds like The Handmaid's Tale, congratulations, you get it. Yesterday, Mike Johnson made his maiden pilgrimage as Speaker to Mar-a-Lago to pledge his allegiance not to the Constitution, but to Donald Trump, on the same day that Trump was voted by historians as the worst president in U.S. history.
coming to you tonight from a room in a building named after a billionaire. And that building is located in the middle of a campus of buildings named after that same billionaire. Rockefeller Center was named after John D. Rockefeller, America's first billionaire, who lived 4 blocks north from where I'm sitting right now. Billionaires have always loved New York. But now that Donald Trump is facing more than $500 million in civil judgments against him in New York courts, the Fox propaganda channel, which is located in Manhattan, a block away from Rockefeller Center, wants you to think that New York is a bad place to do business because it has laws.
New York was already a loser state. Like California is a loser state. There are many loser states because of policy, high taxes, uncompetitive regulation. It was already on the top of the list of being a loser state. I would never invest in New York now.
Well, New York doesn't exactly need his money because, among other things, New York has more billionaires than it knows what to do with. And most of the rest of those billionaires are in California, that other loser state, the richest state in the union, which has an economy that would rank as the 5th largest economy in the world if California were a country. The states that guy calls loser states, California and New York, are always competing for the most expensive home sale in the country. The current winner is New York, where a billionaire bought an apartment 5 blocks north of John D. Rockefeller's old apartment for $238 million. $238 million to have a box in the sky with bathrooms and a kitchen. That's how much billionaires love New York, especially New York City, especially Manhattan, whose courts have visited more than $500 million in judgments against Donald Trump just this year. No billionaire in Manhattan is going to leave because of what happened to Donald Trump in court. Billionaire Mike Bloomberg is staying. You can't find a prouder New Yorker than Mike Bloomberg, who served 3 terms as the city's mayor, the only billionaire mayor in American history. In fact, New Yorker Mike Bloomberg was the richest elected official in American history, and nothing can get him to leave New York City. My first guest tonight, the governor of New York, was an aide to New York's senior Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan when Senator Moynihan got fed up with the kind of talk you just heard from that guy on Fox about New York. And Senator Moynihan started publishing a report every year to show how much more money the state of New York contributed to the federal government than it got back from the federal government. And in that report, New York really was a loser state, which is to say the state of New York lost money because of its membership in the United States of America. And the state of California lost money because of its membership in the United States of America. And the states that guy called winner states later in that interview all really were winner states because they won money from the United States Treasury, meaning they all collected more money from the federal government than they ever paid in. The state that guy went on to praise, the states that he really praised, were North Dakota and West Virginia. 2 of the least desirable states to live in, according to their population numbers. In a country where we are all free to choose where we live, North Dakota ranks 48th in population. West Virginia ranks 40th. No one on Fox wants to live in North Dakota, and no one on Fox wants to live in West Virginia. I've been to both of those beautiful states more than once, and they have entranced me by their beauty and the charm of their people, but I, for one, couldn't make a living in either one of them. In fact, most people you see on Fox live in New York, where Fox has always been headquartered and will always be headquartered. The state of New York has been supporting the federal government from the beginning, first by the collection of tariffs in the largest port in the country, where when tariffs were the largest source of the federal government's revenue at first. And then throughout the 20th century and 21st century, through the income tax, when New York had more top income taxpayers than any other state in the Union. Interstate highways in Alabama were not paid for by the people of Alabama. New York City subways were not paid for by the people of Alabama or the taxpayers of North Dakota or the taxpayers of West Virginia. New York City is economically the most dynamic city in human history. And if the laws of New York enforced against Donald Trump cause him financial pain, that won't stop any billionaire or any business from thriving in New York as they always have and always will.